Alright guys, welcome to a special bonus episode of Tales from the 90's. If you've never seen this before, Tales from the 90's is a podcast I do where I pick a random year and a month from the year of the 90's, and I go back and I talk about all kinds of things about pop culture, music, TV, wrestling, just whatever I feel like talking about. Anyway, on my bonus episodes that I do once a month, I go a little bit out of the 90's on some of the things I talk about. And this one is definitely, a lot of it happened in the 90's, but a lot happened in the 80's and the 2000s and beyond. But anyway, this is as you see, the title is called Mothers and Fathers. I'm recording this today. Yesterday was Father's Day. I was wanting to do a Mother's Day and a Father's Day episode, but I didn't want to, I just kind of wanted to just put them together, because talk about one, inevitably you talk about the other, even though, as you'll find out, I didn't grow up, with both parents together, throughout childhood and everything. But some of you out there have, and it's hard to talk about your mother and without talking about your father, unless you didn't grow up with either. But anyway, if you don't know me personally, you probably won't want to watch this one, because this has nothing to do with pop culture or anything like that. It's just my family. Anyway, this is my bonus episode all about my mom and my dad. So yeah, like I said, I don't know exactly when my mom and dad split. I believe it was when I was younger, maybe when I was 4 or 5. Let's see. My brother was born when I turned the year. I was 4 then, so yeah, it had been before then, because my brother is not by my dad. But anyway, I'm just trying to establish a timeline there. This isn't anything negative about, the way I look at it is I wish my mom and dad had stayed together, as all kids do if they, their parents are good to them. But at the same time, I'm glad they didn't, because without that, I wouldn't have my brothers and my sisters. And before, and I have other sisters too that were born from my dad before he got with my mom. But like I said, my younger brothers and my younger sisters wouldn't have been born. If you see any flashing lights in the background, I got poltergeist playing in the background. I'm still on my Friday the 13th theme. I didn't get a full Friday the 13th. Every year I do on Friday the 13th, I do 24-hour horror movie or show marathon. And what does it have to do with this? A lot of this has to do with my dad and my mom too. I'll get into a little bit of that. But anyway, I didn't get a full day of that because I had to do wrestling Friday. So we got Monday the 16th, continues Friday the 13th. So that's what that flashing is, if you see it. Hopefully I don't give you a stroke, if it's even showing up on the camera. Stroke or seizure, whatever the flashing lights do. Anyway, like I said, I was just trying to establish there when my mom and dad broke up, because I wasn't trying to, make this a negative thing. I love both my parents dearly. My dad's no longer with me. He died in September 2006. I can't believe 19 years it's going to be this year. And sorry if you hear my dogs in the background and the air conditioner. It's hot out. I say that in every video. But yeah, like I said, in a perfect world, I could have stayed with, I wish my mom would have stayed with my dad and had my brothers and sisters as they are now. But you don't get that. But you make the most out of everything you can. And I'm going to start off talking about my mom. Can't talk about my mom without talking about my grandparents, and the greatest place I ever grew up was my granny's house. My granny and Papaw Jesse. Granny Willamay and my Papaw Jesse. That was her mom and dad. And they lived on 6929 Lawyer Road. And if you went there now, the land... I'm not going to get too much into that, because I'm trying to keep anything negative out of this, because I want it to be a loving thing and not because, when you talk about the past, and you're like... Then you got to talk about the present. Is like, oh, this isn't as good. I'll just say that the house isn't there anymore. The land's completely changed. I hate it. It sucks, but nothing I can do about it. Anyway, this place where I grew up, I don't know if Josh remembers it or if he was even alive then, but I'm one of the few grandkids that remembers. There's a couple other, but remembers when the house was blue. They ended up putting other like a tan colored, cream color, whatever you call it, siding on it. But anyway, it's this old, almost like farmhouse type thing that they added on to. I wrote a whole story about it. It's called Over the River and Through the Woods. It's just telling the the true life story of just the best place that I've ever been to or lived at. As you find out, I lived there. Sorry if this thing gets long. I get in my memories, or as the young people call it, in my feelings, and I get rambling at the mouth, as I do on every video I do. But anyway, yeah, my mom, she had a brother and sister, and she also had another brother and sister, I believe from my grandma's first marriage. I don't know if they lived there with her or not when she was growing up. They may have lived with their dad. I can't remember. And Mom, if you're watching this, anything I get wrong, it isn't intentional, and let me know what I did get wrong. I'm going off memory here. But just like I said, that place, my sisters never got to experience that. I don't know if Emily may have been there a few times, but I know Natalie wasn't, because she'd moved out of there before then. But man, we love that place. Anyway, 6929 Lawyer Road. It was in Newtown, which is in Claremont County. Lived there a couple times. Never for long periods of time. It was always living with Granny. But Granny was the sweetest woman. And there was a few times I made her mad, and just the look on her face when I made her mad was enough to crush me. Like, she never whipped us, or she barely raised her voice to us. I don't know how she was, how she was with Mom when they were growing up, but I know as a grandma, for me, like, the few times I made her mad or upset, or at least that she showed it, I probably upset her a lot, sadly. But it was like someone could beat me to death with a belt, and it wouldn't feel nearly as bad as getting one of those looks of disappointment from her. But Papa Jesse was definitely different. He didn't say much. He liked to sit in his, and I know this isn't grandparents' day, I'm just talking, can't talk about my grandparents and then gloss over them. But he'd always sit in the kitchen and listen to his bluegrass, and was always a lot stricter, and wasn't as loving. I'm sure he was in his own way, but he wasn't like the type to give hugs and all this other stuff. It reminds me of the Randy Travis song "The Box," where Randy Travis is singing about his dad that died, and he found this box of like stuff that he'd given his dad over the years he thought he'd lost, and a poem he wrote about how much he loved everybody. I have a feeling Papa Jesse was that way. He never like openly showed it a whole lot, but I still didn't feel like, oh, he don't like me. I still felt close to him, so it wasn't like a I don't say deadbeat, but that type of person, But anyway, that's where my mom came from, and I don't know if she lived there her whole life, or if they'd moved there when she sometime, but I believe that she'd lived there her whole life. But like I said, my mom and my dad, it's hard to separate mom and dad at the beginning, because you gotta talk about how they met, and I don't want to do it twice, so I'll just do it here. I don't know like how they met or anything. I do know that my dad was older than my mom, and like I said, they'd both been married before. I believe my dad was married. Yeah, they'd both been married before. But I was born in, I don't know what hospital I was born in, but the first place I lived was Price Hill, which was where my dad lived with his dad, which I'll get into him and my grandma Lois once I get more talking exclusively about my dad. But that's where we lived at first. We lived in like this, it's like the third floor. I believe it was like an attic. I remember it being really small. My dad, or my grandpa and grandma Lois lived on the first floor, and also Uncle Dan lived down there too. He had his own room down the hallway. And that was where we lived at first. And of course, not too many memories about that time, I'm grateful that I have a couple VHS tapes that my grandpa Wally made me, that you can check them out on my channel. I'm still uploading some. I'm still recording. You got to take it from the VHS and make it digital. So it's a process. But I'm still putting some of those on there if you want to check any of that stuff out, just to see kind of me being me as a kid. So I had this weird obsession when I said the word yellow. I would go whoa, 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 like annoyingly. Anyway, like I said, at some point they'd gotten divorced, and moved in with she ended up moving in with the boyfriend, which was Josh's dad. And like I said, I'm keeping the negative stuff out. I'm not gonna. If you see me talk about Marky Foe on here before, I'm not gonna get into any of him. But anyway, I have 3 brothers, and I've got 2 sisters from my mom. I was the last of my dad's kids, and I was the first of my mom's kids. It's kind of funny to think about. But like I said, we lived in Kentucky for a little bit. Then we moved back to Granny's, and I've just memories like little memories that don't mean much to anybody. Like I remember sitting and watching Roseanne with her, like in this little. We all lived in like the upstairs of Granny's house, and like this. I believe we lived in one room. I can't remember. I believe it was the room to the left. You go straight at the top of the stairs. There's the bathroom, and there's one on the left. Yeah, we did, because Granny's room I think was on the right, because her and Papa Jesse, they were older, so they had different rooms. Papa Jesse's bedroom was downstairs, like right in the middle as you walk in. It's like an opening. But Granny lived upstairs on the right, and me, Josh, and Mom lived on the left side. But I just remember watching Roseanne with her, and the movie Drick, I don't know who that, Dick Tracy had just came out on cable. And that was a pretty popular movie back in the early 90s. It's a superhero kind of comic style movie that I don't really like these days, but I love Dick Tracy. I remember getting the little watch from Burger King and being disappointed because you couldn't really talk to people on it. Little did I know that something futuristic as talking to somebody on your watch would really become a thing. But just like little memories of that. And then my mom got on her feet. I don't remember her jobs. I remember later on she worked at the place where she met Steve, which is my sister's dad. I remember they made like computer parts, but I don't remember all her other jobs. It's funny, some things you don't. But she'd gotten on her feet, and we moved to Mount Carmel, which is another place in Claremont County. Which, if you don't know, it's in Ohio. It's the county over from Hamilton, which is where Cincinnati's located at. But yeah, we lived there for a little while, and I remember, my mom not having much, but getting us a Nintendo. This was after Super Nintendo came out, so, but we were like little, so it's not like we knew what the latest video game was. We just, we wanted a Nintendo. Because I remember my grandma Lois, my dad's mom, playing Nintendo all the time. And sneaking up and playing Super Mario 2, which is my favorite one. I know it's the weird one, but it's my favorite one. But I remember doing, and then getting the games. We had the Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt combo, Friday the 13th the game, the Ninja Turtles, the original Turtles game on Nintendo, and just stuff like that. The little memories you have. Like I said, my mom was, working hard to support us, being a single mom. It's not talked about. A lot of people talking about, their single moms raising them, and I still feel it's not talked about enough because, and that goes for dads too. I'm just saying my mom because in this situation. Trying not to get into some negativity here, but I wasn't around my dad a lot, and I'll get into that until later on in my teen years because of Marky Foe. I'll just leave that, and we'll go on. So a lot of my early times were spent with my mom, and of course with my granny and Papa Jesse. We would go over there not every weekend, but a lot of the weekends, and a lot of times during the summer. Give my mom a break. Plus, we loved it. Whether times were good or whether times were bad, it wasn't always about wanting to get away from our parents. It was about wanting to get to their house. It was how much we loved being there. But she did everything she could to take care of us. And I remember we had a tape that my dad had made, because I don't want to talk about horror movies. One of my mom's favorite movies of all time is Burnt Offerings. I watched that with her over and over again, and it's one of my favorites too. It's in my top 50 horror movies of all time lists. I can't remember if I put it second or third, but it's a great movie. And the memories of watching it with her are even better than just the movie. I'll put on the movie and watch it for what it is, but I'll also get those memories. And there's certain things you watch that sometimes you don't just watch it. I'll talk about another horror movie when I get to talking about my dad. that was my number one on there, and a lot of people don't like it at all, but I've never even heard of it, half of them. But just so many memories of that. It was on a tape with the Tales from the Crypt movie from the 1970s. It was 1972, I think. Yeah, 1972, the original Tales from the Crypt British movie. That was on the same tape. And there was also another tape with Creepshow. It was taped off of TV, but my mom specifically made sure that the last story with the bugs wasn't in there because she hated roaches. Like just they creeped her out so bad, so she didn't even want that on the tape. For a long time, I'd even forgotten that was part of the Creepshow movie. But yeah, and we ended up meeting Marky Fo, as I said, which is, I should talk about. Travis was born. I don't remember if he was born when we were in Mount Carmel or when we were at Granny's house. I feel like it was at Mount Carmel. I know he lived there. But then we ended up, she met Mark, and we moved to Norwood, and ended up having my brother Clinton, which is the baby boy of the family. And just a lot of, I've talked on here about, the bad times and everything, but there was a lot of good times I remember having with Mom. Like, we would, just special things with just me and her. Like, during the summers, she was on this, like, working out kick. And she was like, working out every day, and I would do a workout with her. We would do like push-ups and just like we didn't have weights or anything, so I would like lift cans like that. And but she would always put on these tapes that she had, on these cassette tapes. I remember them too. There was a Reba McEntire live tape that she really loved, and there was the Michael Bolton Time, Love, and Tenderness tape, which was. I forgot to mention that there was a brief time when her and my dad were, were getting back together. It was after Travis was born, but before she'd met Mark, and he'd actually taken her to the Michael Bolton concert. I believe he actually took her to a Hank Williams Jr. concert, and they won a radio there too. Kind of like that song where Alan Jackson, dad won a radio at a country show, and just. My love of music comes from them both. I always remember listening to music growing up. That's always a huge part of my life, as many of you know. But yeah, I remember just working out to those tapes, and it was so much fun. Like, if I would have told my friends at school, I work out in the living room or I think it was the dining room actually. I work out in the dining room with my mom, listening to Michael Bolton. They would have been. I didn't have many friends as a kid anyway because I was always weird. But that would have taken any friend away. But it was stuff I enjoyed, and just so much great memories there. I remember some of my favorite things that she made. My favorite thing she ever made was pot roast. Man, I love her pot roast. I give anything. Mom, if you're listening, next time I come out, I want you to make your pot roast again. I will pay for the ingredients. It's funny, whenever I go to Golden Corral, my first thing is to get some mashed potatoes and get some of their pot roast, because it's almost as good as Mom's. It's right there. But I love pot roast, and she made the best. And another one she made all the time that I loved was Swedish meatballs. I ain't eaten that recently. I let it sit in the refrigerator too long. I ate it like 4 days later, and I got the worst food poisoning. So Swedish meat. And the Swedish meatballs I make isn't anywhere like hers. She actually made the meatballs from scratch. I've just been getting the frozen stuff just because, I'm lazy. But really, nothing compares to her Swedish meatballs. And the other thing that she made that I loved was lasagna. She put frozen spinach in it and cottage cheese, two things that I cannot stand. Like, I can eat spinach leaves for salad, but canned spinach or frozen spinach, ugh. But that and cottage cheese I absolutely can't stand. But she made that in lasagna, and somehow it just, was so good. I want those 3 meals again, Mom. Get to cooking. No, but seriously, just like little random things. I actually, if you see me looking over here, I wrote some notes just so I would remember some of it, because I've tried to do videos before where I talk about personal things, and I'll forget something, and then later on I'll be like, man, I forgot that. So I've been, over a couple days, been jotting down things that I remember, like, oh yeah, just some funny memories I remember, like the song Cotton Eye Joe, She Cannot Stand. Because this was in Norwood. She lived, this is when we lived with Mark, obviously. And she would have her alarm clock because they got up early in the morning. He was a truck driver. Like I said, I can't remember what she did, but she went to work every day. I just can't remember what it was. I'm sure she can fill me in. But they get up at like 4 or 5 or something every day, and the alarm clock would be on the radio station. And she got up, or this song, whatever time the alarm went off, this song, the Cotton Eye Joe song, came blaring out of the speaker. Scared the crap out of her. I think it was the first time she'd ever heard it. I think. I mean, that song's been around forever, but that version in the 90s, like, I think they're called the Rednecks or something. But, like, it scared the crap out of her. She's never wanted to hear that song since. So, next karaoke, I'm doing it. But, just, there's some memories, like, I was talking to her the other day, because I couldn't remember her mom's mom, or Granny, her mom's mom. Her mom. I've never met my great-grandma from my mom's side, or my dad's side, I don't think. Anyway, her mom's family lived in Tennessee, and I was asking her the other day what it was. It was in Sparta, Tennessee, and it was like one of them old houses, like the floor was sloped, and I was like, I would say stuff about it. My mom was about to die because I was embarrassing her because I was asking questions about the floor. And then the stuff I would do to her in stores. Like, we would always go to the store, like, especially when we lived with Granny. Granny would go with us. And I remember Granny always bought us I think it was Keebler, not exactly sure. The soft batch cookies. And I would eat a whole row of them before we even got out of the store. Granny would just give them to me. Because he had to calm me down because of the stuff I did in the store. I would lay in the aisle and throw a fit. Or I would wander off by myself, get like maybe just one aisle away from her and get lost, so I go up to the front and have them say my mom's name over the speaker, and she about died at that. There was one time we came home from KFC, going to Granny's house. It was either coming home, I believe this is when I was with my dad. When they were still together, we were going over to her house. We'd gotten KFC, which was something we did a lot. It's like, we're getting chicken going to Granny's house. Wonder where my KFC love started. But anyway, they made the mistake, the first time and the last time, they made this mistake of putting the KFC bucket next to me on the way. I literally ate the skin off of every single piece of chicken. Because I was probably going, I'm hungry. I think they said, you can have a piece of chicken. So I took that as, well, they said I can have a piece of chicken. What if I just take the skin off of all of them? I didn't even eat a piece yet. I got so sick and I got in so much trouble. But another thing we always liked to do was watch the Stephen King miniseries that came out in the 90s. There were so many of them. The one I remember the most was The Langoliers. You know, it's one of them cheesy ones about, excuse me, they go back, people are on this airplane. Anybody asleep basically disappeared. Anybody that was awake disappeared. The people that were asleep were left on this plane. They somehow went, because of something, they went back in time. But anyway, these things are like time eaters. They were called the Langoliers, or that's what the people called them. They like literally ate the old time. They had to find a way to get back. But anyway, little things like that, and like watching Salem's Lot with her, like the original movie. That was one of her favorites. Just a lot of that stuff just brings back so many good memories. But yeah, that a lot. And then later on, we ended up having a difficult relationship, and it was 100% my fault. It was me becoming a teenager. I was rebelling against everything, and it was like right after we left Mark, which was a horrible time. And I was like I said, I'm not trying to make this negative, but all the stuff that was going on then had stopped. But that was almost the time I started getting worse. Like, I don't know, like, it was, I was used to bad things happening, and there wasn't bad things happening, so I made them happen. I don't know what it was. Teenage rebellion, a little of both, mental things, I don't know, but I started skipping school a lot for no reason. All this other stuff, and I ended up getting make her go to court because of my truancy, Ended up having to get community service, had to shovel elephant poop at the zoo. That's another story. But it was around that time, which I'll get to why, I reconnected with my dad, and we decided it was best on everybody that I go live with him in Indiana when I was like 15, and we had a pretty strained relationship during that time, just because I was unruly. Like I said, it wasn't not just me trying to put a positive spin on it. It really was my fault. And that relationship ended up getting better. I would do some more questionable things. Well, in between that, I ended up winning, because I'm really good at winning radio contests. I won a Tim McGraw CD. I was real good at being the right caller. But on this particular one, you had to be the right. It was a George Strait concert tickets down at the. It's called the U.S. Bank Arena then. I think it's called the Heritage Center or something like that. Anyway, it was originally Riverfront Coliseum, if you know downtown Cincinnati. It's right next to Great American Ballpark. It was originally called Riverfront Coliseum. But you had to call B105, which is our main country channel. You had to be the right caller, and then listen to these, I think it was 3-second clips of George Strait songs and get them all right. And I got them right, so I won 2 tickets. I remember going on the bus to get those. Those were awesome. But anyway, I wanted to take her to it, and we went. I remember it was a winter night. It was in January, and it had snowed so much, and my mom didn't like driving down. My mom hates driving downtown Cincinnati. She will not do it unless it's absolutely necessary. So we took a cab, and we almost didn't get one because the weather was just so bad. There was so much snow, but we had so much fun that night. George Strait just standing there for 2 hours. Every 3 or 4 songs, he had 4. If you ever seen some of his concerts, he has a revolving stage, because he just stands there and sings. And with George Strait, that's all you need. But at this concert, he didn't have I guess that capability for that stage. So it's just a square stage with a microphone on 4 sides, and every 3 or 4 songs he would switch sides, so he wouldn't just be singing to one part, because it was in the round the way that was set up. But we sang our butts off, and she bought his single. It was during the time of his top, his what was it? 50 #1 CD had come out, and the "I Hate Everything" song had just come out, and she bought a hat that said I hate everything," and I almost said "I ate everything." That's a hat I should have. But anyway, she ended up giving me that hat later on, and it's hanging in my closet. I love that. But like I said, another questionable decision. I ended up moving in with somebody much older than me when I was 21, and she was almost close to my mom's age, is how much older she was than me. And just it made my mom upset just because of the age difference and everything. But later on, as I gotten older and more mature and everything, we've had a lot better relationship. I don't get to see her anywhere near as much as I want to, just because I never know if I can trust my vehicle. It's a long drive, and she lives farther north from Cincinnati now. I can't remember exactly where she lives. I've never even been to her house where she lives right now. But last time we were there was July 4th last year. I wish I could go July 4th this year. I don't know if money-wise we're going to be able to, but that was the first time that all of us, all the brothers, the sisters, our spouses, our kids, even Steve was there. Steve and Mom aren't together anymore, but they're still good friends. Obviously, they have. I'm glad they're still friends, and they have Emily and Natalie, my younger sisters, and it was great seeing them all and meeting Josh's new girlfriend and Travis's girlfriend and Clinton's wife. The first time I'd met any of them, the first time I've met some of their kids, that was a great day, and I hope for a lot more. I don't want that to be the last great day ever, But like I said, we've had a lot better relationship, but I don't get to see her as much as I did and much as I want to. And I hope you're watching this, Mom. I love you. I thank you so much for everything you did. I know there's times I put on Facebook things about the past, and it might upset you because of the stuff I'm talking about, but none of it I put on you. I never blamed you for anything. anything, you did everything you could. You know, you were going, everything we went through, you were going through too. You know, if not more than we were. And you did everything you could for us, and you finally were able to get us away from there. Like I said, I'm trying to keep it out of the negative thing there, but it's hard to do when I'm trying to express how important that was to me. I thank you so much, Mom, for getting us away from bad situations, and, you know, just from everything. Like, thank you for my brothers and sisters, obviously, but just, you know, thank you for the love and support over the years, and not giving up on me. You know, you didn't just ship me off to my dad's because you couldn't deal with me. You were trying to, you know, see if a change could help both of us, because I was really making things bad at home. I know it. But, you know, I'm so grateful to have you, and I just can't thank you enough. Thank you, Mom, so much. I love you. I'll talk about my dad. Like I'd said, he'd passed away in September of 2006, and, you know, I promise you that getting over losing a parent, it does get a little easier, you know, 19 years later, but the pain don't ever completely go away. But I promise you, like people that may have just gone through it recently, it does get a little easier as you go on. I mean, I should say it does for me. For a lot of people, it don't. For some people, they can get over it quickly, you know. Mine took a while, but anyway, we're gonna go back to the beginning. Like I said, when I talk about my mom, I'm gonna talk about my grandparents. Grandpa Wally and Grandma Lois were, you know, I had known them just as much as I knew my granny and Papa Jesse. Maybe a little more at the beginning, because, like I said, we lived there with them. My Grandma Lois was kind of opposite. My granny was the nicer one. Papa Jesse was like the meaner one. It was kind of opposite. Grandma Lois was kind of meaner. Grandpa Wally was like the easy to get along with. Like, it was. I was gonna say it's almost like they should have done like a swap. But the funny thing about that is after Grandma Lois had died, and she died in 1991, my grandpa would, you know, take me over there after, you know, being over to see my dad. And there was this one time my grandpa he was coming to pick me up from there, and my Grandpa Jesse somehow gotten it in his head that my Grandpa Wally was coming over to try to either be with or steal away Granny, his wife. And he came out there with a baseball bat going after him, and Granny and my mom and me were like, what are you doing? Like, I don't know what got into his head to make him think he was coming there to steal his wife. But anyway, you know, Grandma Lois, like I said, when I was talking about my mom about the Nintendo, she loved to play Nintendo. Grandpa Wally loved his VCRs and record player and CD player, and especially his video recorder, his camera, which is where I got my love of cameras. He was recording everything. I really wish that a lot of those tapes that he recorded were still around. I've got two, and I don't know if there's any more that even still exist. One was with my grandma, my granny. They made a tape for her, you know, recorded off of snippets of other tapes. And then another one was like the only one remaining when I'd moved in with my Grandpa Wally in like the early 2000s. But I really wish those were still around, because they have, you know, like I said, you can check out those home movies on here. You can see my dad and my mom, you know, when they were still together. You can see, you know, after, when I was like 5 or 6 and I was over there after they'd broken up. And you can see my Uncle Dan. But just, man, he loved cameras, and so did I. And music, you know, I definitely took after him, I think, more than any of the other grandparents. Of the 4 grandparents, I took after him the most of, like, loving music and videos and all that stuff. But I remember a short time while I was alive, I don't remember, because I don't have memories, but my great-grandpa Muggsy, as they called him, I believe it was my grandpa's dad, I believe. He was living there, and if I'm wrong, someone correct me. But they would tell the funniest stories about him. Like my dad and my Uncle Dan, when they were kids, my Uncle Dan like dared my dad to like hit Muggsy in the back of the head. He hit him in the back of the head with a Coke bottle, which of course then the 50s, I think it was the 50s, if not early 60s. Of course, those bottles were glass. Busted it over his head. If I got that wrong, it was my Uncle Dan that did it. I'm sorry. But the one story I always remember is the upstairs toilet, wherever they lived. I don't know if it was there or if it was somewhere else. But the upstairs, the roof had leaked. And anyway, into the bathroom, because I think there might have been a bathroom upstairs. So he would sit on the toilet, because it's where it leaked, with an umbrella while he went to the bathroom. But like I said, I don't have any individual memories, but I believe he was still alive briefly when I was young. He'd probably died before I was even 3 or 4. But like I said, we lived there in Price Hill on Warsaw Avenue. Like I said, we lived on the second floor, or we lived on the third floor. Grandpa and Grandma lived on the first floor with Uncle Dan, or the second floor. The first floor was actually a flower shop owned by whoever owned the building. It's now a cell phone store. I don't know what the other two are on with their apartments or storage or what, but I'd like to actually go there someday. Maybe see if it's possible to actually look around in there, unless it's somebody's house. Just to look, see if anything looks the same. Man, that would be fun. Maybe I should contact whoever owns that and see if I could do it. I would pay to go there and film if I could. But later on, after Grandma Lois had died, Grandpa just, I guess the place was just too big and maybe too many memories. He ended up moving on to Enright Avenue, which was, if you look across the street, this is the street that's, directly there, kind of over to the side a little bit. But anyway, he ended up moving into I believe it was an apartment there. I just remember one floor, but I thought it was a 2-story place, but I remember him on one floor. I don't know, it may have been a house, but it wasn't very big. Anyway, I remember going there to visit, and I remember my dad taking me, even younger than this, to a place called Pete's, which is right down the road from the original place where we lived. And I'd always get grilled cheese with pickles with roads, as I call them, because I didn't know what crinkle cut prickles. What is a prickle? Crinkle prickle. I can't talk. Peter Potter pickle peppers. Okay? Anyway, pickles with roads on it from Pete's is what I got with my grilled cheese. But we would go down there and do laundry, and he would always get me one of those, if you remember from the 90s, those mini football helmets. They're this big around, from the different teams, and always try to get different ones. I don't know if I don't think I ever had a complete set, but I had a pretty big set at one point. And just little things, with my mom, little things I remember him, shampoos. I'd always just remembered being, the generic rain smell or fresh scent or all that, whatever names they give to the blue junk in the bottle. But it was the first time I ever remember smelling like a fruit-smelling shampoo. My dad got green apple shampoo. So, and that was this stuff smells good. I wasn't the Tide Pod generation, so I didn't try to taste it. But anyway, just as little memories. And of course, I talked about with my mom, watching horror movies was definitely me and Dad's thing too. Return of the Living Dead, which I'm actually going to see at the Ohio Theater downtown here, where I live at in Madison, Indiana. They're doing a horror fest at the end of October, and they're going to show the 40th anniversary of Return of the Living Dead. They're actually going to have the actress who played Trash, if you remember that movie. She's actually going to be there, and they're going to have it's called Scarioke and all kinds of stuff for 2 days. That I'm going with Mars, my kid, and with my wife. It's going to be so much fun. But I remember watching that, and later on I would watch that and other scary stuff with my kids, just like with my dad did. It's definitely a family tradition, and it was so much fun. Buried Alive was a made-for-TV movie in the 1990. It came out on USA, and he recorded it, and we watched that over and over again. It actually made my top 50 horror movies, and a lot of people never even heard of it. Or if they have, it's another, because there's been a couple movies called Buried Alive. But That, and of course, the Friday the 13th movies. And the one that is my number one horror movie of all time, and nothing will ever change it, it's called The Horror Show. It's also known internationally as House 3, the third of the House movies, and it's really just by name only. It has nothing to do with the first two House movies, which House 2 I watched with him too, the old guy, Grandpa Jesse, which he swore was my actual Grandpa Jesse. He's like, he came back from the dead. He's really him. But anyway, that House 2 movie, I watched with him forever. But The Horror Show, it's about this, the main big scene in it is about a serial killer, and he gets the electric chair. And I was like obsessed as a little kid with this electric chair scene. So much so that my sister Jody, which was his oldest kid, like I said, had before he got with my mom, but that's his oldest, and of course my oldest sister. They remember my two. I don't know if it was all my sisters, but at least her. They would put me in this chair, and you know the little electric chair thing they put on your head. We obviously didn't have one of those, so they put a colander on my head, and they would pretend to hit the switch, and I'd be going. It was so. Yes, I was warped as a kid. Okay, and later on, I ended up doing that with my kids. I would pretend to have the Jinky chair, because that was the guy's name. Max Jinky was played by Brian James. Lance Henriksen was the cop, Lucas. But there was the Jinky chair. And later I'd do that to the kids, but I went like off the wall with it. For some reason, I had these like it's going to sound weird, but there was like these boxers I'd gotten in this package. They didn't fit right. And they were just like laying in the closet. So I didn't look like I wore them. But one day I just decided to pick them up and put them on my head as the Jinky hat. So anytime we played Jinky, that would go on my head, and I'd pretend to chase him around the house. Jinky's gonna get you. That would probably lead to the crackhead Dave hat later on. But anyway, just so much memories of horror movies. And then said at some point he'd moved to Indiana, which is where my sister's mom had moved, and my sister's, I think. So that's why he ended up moving down to Indiana, which is how I'm even where I'm at now. You know, I wouldn't have met my wife if I hadn't have met. I was introduced by actually my sister's sister. We're not related because she was born from my sister's mom and her dad, so we weren't related. But that was actually she was actually the one that introduced me to my wife. I want to say current wife, my only wife. We've been married twice, but still my only wife, my current one. But she, like I said, so that was all, you know, kind of a domino effect of, you know, how I'm even here today is, you know, my dad moving here back in the 90s. And, you know, we, from time I was, when was that? I'm trying to remember the time period. Well, 10, 11, something on, until I was like 15, I didn't get to see my dad again, which was really hard. And I know he missed me too. It wasn't, you know, I'm not getting into the negatives, but it had nothing to do with him not wanting to see me. You know, he was living in Indiana and all the Mark stuff. But anyway, what actually reconnected us was a horrible event. Was my Uncle Dan dying. I believe he died of liver cirrhosis. It was in 1999, and you know, either my grandpa or my dad got a hold of Granny, because, you know, she'd always had the same phone number forever, and Granny was always friendly with my dad and my grandpa. You know, even after they gotten divorced, she wasn't one of those, I'm not talking to you, because, you know, my dad was never bad to my mom. You know, whatever problems they had nothing to do with abuse or anything like that. But yeah, he got a hold of her saying my Uncle Dan died, and I got to go to the funeral. It was, you know, I was terrified going there because I hadn't seen my dad in forever, you know. I hadn't seen my sisters, my grandpa. It was, you know, that part was terrifying on its own, and this was during the time I was acting out. But you know, it sucks that something so bad happened, and I don't know if I'll ever do an uncle's special, or maybe I'll do one about the family bonus episode. But I always, anytime I think of my Uncle Dan, I always have this bad thought in my head because of something stupid I did as a kid, and he probably never even thought about it again, but it was always in my head. The one independent memory I have of him, like I say independent memory, meaning like I can remember it in my head, not just seeing it on tape or someone telling me about it, was he wouldn't let me, he was watching me, and he wouldn't let me do something, and I got mad at him, and I decided to call 911 on him. I was like 5 or 6 or something, and he got like so upset with me. He didn't get like mad or like screaming at me, just like he just got so upset about it. And I remember feeling so bad that I'd done that, and like that's, anytime I think of him now, that's the first thing that pops in my head, and I hate it because there's such a negative thing of and I guess in my head I feel so guilty about that. And like I said, he probably never even thought of it again after after a couple days after that. But I hate that goes into my head anytime I think about him, because I just remember, like I said, I don't have many independent memories of him because I was so young. But just from watching the tapes, I can tell he loved me so much. But and it sucks that I had to find out he died from a phone call, and that sucks as how I got reintroduced to my dad. But in a way, I'm glad I got it. I'm not gonna say I'm glad he died, but I'm glad that I was able to see my dad again. And I ended up going and staying with him for the weekend, where him and Grandpa lived on was it Iliff Avenue, I think. They lived in like this house. They always lived in the houses on second and third floors. Like my dad was living up in the attic for he had lived in Indiana, but he was in Cincinnati, dealing with the funeral arrangements and stuff. So he was staying where my Uncle Dan stayed, which is in this attic, and in the second floor it was like kind of split in half. My grandpa had the right side, and he was living in there in these very small apartments, which I ended up literally living half in and half out of a closet, because that's where I slept, because I didn't want to sleep in the recliner. I couldn't sleep in that all the time, which of course now I can. But I ended up laying in, had this little closet set up where I'd have a TV in there, and my Sega Dreamcast and my VCR and music and everything. And there's like a little closet. It was actually like a doorway between the outside and the door of the neighbor, but the doors were locked, so it wasn't like I was trying to get into the neighbor's house or anything. But I was like, at night I would put the bed down, which I'd sit in the chair by day, and half part of my body would be in the closet, the other half would be laid in the kitchen. Anyway, I just remember reconnecting with my dad, and just us hitting it off right again, from the start. And then I had to go back home, and he ended up going to Indiana. He would be back to visit, every once in a while. He had appointments at the VA in Cincinnati, or just to visit my grandpa. He eventually would move back for a little while, but I guess it was during that rebellious time, like literally one grandpa's house. It was my first day of community service, and I took the wrong bus and missed it, so I just ended up going to his house and then going home, and I got in trouble for that. It wasn't my fault I missed the bus, but it was my fault I didn't go home, because I was afraid. I'm lucky they overlooked that one day and let me continue once I actually found the place. Because what it was is I got on the right bus, I just didn't know where to get off at, and I just kept going. And then I was like way past, and I was like, well, I'm going to take the bus back downtown, then I'm going to go to Grandpa's house, Grandpa Wally. Can't remember what I called him as a kid. I think it was Papa Wally, but later on I called him Grandpa Wally. But like I said, I ended up moving down there to Vivi with him, living with him and my sister. And I was still a rebellious teen and wasn't doing what I was supposed to. I ended up getting expelled from school and all this stuff, and ended up leaving school. I ended up eventually got my GED and my associate's degree and my master's degree. So it can be done for those that have haven't finished school and want to go back and everything. Definitely do it, but I definitely wouldn't recommend it either. I wish I would have focused on my education. All my reasons for bad home life with stepfather was over, so I don't understand why I was the way I was, but it was what it was. And eventually my dad ended up moving back in with my grandpa, I think to help him, but I stayed down there because I was going to school, and just eventually, you know, ended up getting expelled, and then ended up just dropping out. And I ended up moving up there with my grandpa and my dad for a while. My dad would come back, and, you know, I'd stay there, and that would go on off and on. And then my dad ended up getting, he had diabetes real bad anyway, but he eventually had to have fingers amputated, and then he had to have his legs amputated, I think one at a time, not both at the same time, I don't believe. But I remember him getting, and he finally got approved for Social Security and got this huge back check. And I'll not trying to say negative things, but he was an alcoholic. You know, I definitely want to say he wasn't abusive. That man would never lift a hand to anybody. And I'm not trying to disparage his name by saying that. You know, everybody knows him, knows he was, and he battled that. But you know, he could have took all that massive amount of money and went out and just bought all the. Before I get on that, I remember him and my grandpa getting into some of the biggest arguments over his drinking. My grandpa got so mad he found a bottle of vodka and he busted on the toilet and broke the toilet seat, so the toilet seat ended up being duct taped. Another one before I move on from this. My dad, first, I gotta go way back. First, he would always make up these stories, okay? He had me convinced that he was the actor Ed Harris in the movie Creepshow. Okay, everybody knows Ed Harris now from other movies, but his first like big starring role was in Creepshow, where he got killed by the gravestone in the Father's Day opening, the first story. But he had me convinced that his name was really, you know, he was the actor Ed Harris, but that Ed Harris is just a stage name. He had me convinced that was him for a while, longer than I should have been. But he would make up these stories like he tried to convince me as a teenager that my grandma and grandpa were, from my mom's side, were really Russian. They were like some Russians that moved to America and changed their identity so they didn't get arrested. But my mom's maiden name is Ford. That was my Grandpa Jesse's last name. Of course, my granny's. But he told me that there. I've told this on a video before, and I still can't say it with a straight face, that my Grandpa Jesse's real name was Yassel Forskinsky. Okay, he just made this stuff up. And of course, I was past the point of believing him about anything. But he kept going on and on. And he would tell these other stories about his ex-wife's brother Mike. He was a drunk all the time too, like Dad was. He told me these stories about how I don't know if these are true stories or not, but they're funny. About how one time he was like cleaning this restaurant or something and stuck his foot in a thing of boiling oil and boiled his foot. And another time where he was trying to be with this woman and he didn't have a condom, so he took a bread bag and put it on and got a yeast infection. I don't know if he made that up or what, but he was crazy. Anyway, he decided one time he didn't have no money and he wanted some vodka, so, you know, what is vodka? It's made out of potatoes. So he literally took some potatoes and boiled them on the stove and alcohol, like rubbing alcohol. Like, this is his plan. He tried it and almost, like, he tried to sip it, almost threw up, put the pan out on the porch, and a squirrel drank out of it and fell over dead within seconds. And he would make these songs up, these crazy songs. Like, I still remember, I'll be singing, a lot of them were Merle Haggard songs because we'd gotten this Merle Haggard For the Record CD, which is like his 43 #1 hits. So he would be singing along with them. And he was, I still will hear his words to these songs. Like, we had this neighbor, what was his name? That's going to drive me crazy. Sam. His name, we called him Stinky Sam because he stunk so bad. Like, I'm not trying to make fun of him. I think he, like, crapped himself all the time. Because, like I said, it was right next to my head was right next to his bathroom door, so I could smell through the bathroom. But my dad had to change his underwear a couple times. but he becomes Stinky Sam. But this part of this song, he's like, I just found 2 squirrels dead this morning. He had Sam's drawers around their freaking head. I'm dying, and you people are probably like, what the heck are you talking about? But if you wonder why I love Cletus T. Judd so much with his parodies and why I make up my own songs, it is my dad coming out in me so much. But it's funny, I had half of the stuff I hadn't even written down as things to talk about because they just come flooding back in my head. But back to my original thing I was talking about, because I was talking about the alcohol, is he could have took all that money that he'd gotten from the back check from Social Security and bought as many bottles as he wanted and stuff like that. But his very first thought was to give his kids like $1,000 each. At least I know I got $1,000. I don't know if my sisters got more or less, or a different amount. I just remember I got $1,000 of it. Like, he didn't like. And it wasn't like oh, look, trying to impress me. It's just, if he had something, he gave it to you. And he never had much, but whenever he did, he would. I remember many times him, making me food, and I was capable of making it for myself when I was like 15 or 16. But he would make sure that my love of open pit barbecues, that just popped in my head, was from him. I remember him and Uncle Jimmy. I think it was my uncle or my cousin. It might have been I think it was my cousin, because it was my Aunt Jan's son. I remember her a lot come over to help, especially near the end, helping with my Grandpa Wally. But yeah, Aunt Jan's son, I believe. I think he was my cousin. Anyway, he owned this a thing that's common everywhere now, is a food truck. But my dad called it the hamburger train. And I got to ride with him and we'd go like 5 in the morning until like 3 or 4. And it was so much fun. I was like barely awake. But and they always use KC Masterpiece on there, which I love. But my dad, got me into open pit barbecue sauce. I love that stuff. But like I said, the memories just come. But like I said, with that, he gave me that, and of course I blew it mostly on CDs and video games, and CD Game Exchange got a lot of that money, tickets to wrestling, DVDs. But just some memories that weren't good times, but just some peaceful memories. Like after his amputation, he would go to this place in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, and I would like take the bus over there, because the Northern Kentucky buses come over to Cincinnati to pick people up to take them to Kentucky. I remember riding the bus there and spending time with him there 3 or 4 times a week. Both times he was in there for each, like I said, he got each of his legs amputated. But and helping him out as much as I could, and he'd give me money for the cafeteria, and we get sandwiches out of the machines and stuff like that. Just like I said, not good times particularly because of the amputations, obviously, but still, some of my last times with him. And then I moved back with my mom. After I lived with my grandpa until he moved in with my Uncle Tim, and I won't speak about him because he didn't let me know when my Grandpa Wally died, and a lot of my family knows and don't have a relationship with him. He's dead now. Obviously, nobody has a relationship with him. He's dead now, but like I said, not trying to bring the negativity into it. But I ended up moving back with my mom, and then moving in with that woman. My dad moved back to Indiana to live with my sister after his amputations, and then, it was things weren't getting really bad, but it was, I didn't have a job, and I was living there with my mom and Steve, and they were having trouble paying the bills, and Steve had made it not like get out, but apparent that I needed to get a job or move out or something. So I ended up moving in with my dad and my sister down there, only for a short period of time, because I met who's now my wife maybe a month after I moved there, and we ended up getting an apartment like within a couple months. It was that quick. But I would come over. This was the year he died, 2006. I would come over. I would come over and tape wrestling, but I'd also hang out with him. I wanted, of course, I wanted to watch wrestling, but I really just wanted to hang out with him. Because we hadn't spent a whole lot of time together the last few years. He'd been down here, and dealing with the amputations, and he would always end up having a finger amputated because would not stop doing the freaking dishes when he had sores on his hands. But he was the type of person, like, he wanted to get things clean, no matter what the cost. It cost him his fingers, literally. But I would go over there, and he ended up dying September 29th, I believe it was. He had congestive heart failure, just because the diabetes and just all the stuff that his body had been through. And it was probably, it's probably the toughest day I've ever had in my life, and so far. And it was, I was okay. I was getting through it. I was crying a little bit, but I was trying to maintain my composure. I actually made the tape for his funeral, like, of music, and I held it together until because he was an Army veteran. He was military police. Another thing I didn't mention, he was also security for the Reds and the Riverfront Coliseum for a while. So he was down there during the Big Red Machine period of the 70s. But like I said, he was in the Army, so he got the flag, and I've actually got it sitting on my desk, right behind my computer here, and in a case. And when they handed me that flag, I cried like I never cried in my life before or since, like screaming almost. Like, I didn't expect it to hit me like the way it did. But it was funny at the funeral. It was my dad's type of funeral. Like I said, it had some of his music playing. But also, when we came in, they had a pair of joke, the big glasses with the big nose and the mustache. Had that on him in the casket. That was my dad. He would have loved it. That reminds me, the funeral. Not a happy time, but his first wife's was her current husband. When he died, we went to his funeral. I was wearing my dad's field jacket, which I don't know whatever happened to that, his Army jacket. But I was wearing it to the funeral because that was like my jacket. And they were giving out, the death party, as I call it. The food they have there, and the quiet room, or whatever they call it at the funeral home, where they have the food, and the family, not inside the main part, but food. And he was stuffing pieces of meat and cheese, everything in my pockets, and like, here, take this. It turns out they were giving us the food anyway. But anyway, got followed home by dogs, and it smelled like meat forever. But anyway, that just reminded me of that. But yeah, that was probably the hardest day of my life. But he was. I wish I'd had more time with him, but the time I did have was just. It was great. We did have the tip. I don't want to skip over that. We did have typical arguing when I was a teen, because, like I said, I was going through that period, and I would yell at him, and he barely raised his voice, but when he did, it hurt me, and I would yell back because I wasn't used to him yelling at me, just like my granny, like I never yelled at her, obviously, but just we had that time where we didn't get along, because I didn't get along with anybody. It wasn't just from 15 to 17, I was not the person I was before or the person I was after. I do not like the 15 to 17 year old me. Do not like that person. I wish that person had never existed. But you go through what you go through, and you learn from it. Hope I'm a better person today because of my mom and dad. Learned so much from them. So many funny memories from both of them. It's not a lot of people get to have the great experience with their mom and dad. I'm one of the lucky few that I look back at them and I don't have my dad was a deadbeat, he was never there, or my mom was always drinking, she was never there for us. It was never a situation like that. I'm very blessed, and I just want to thank everybody for watching this. If you know me, even if you don't know me and you watch this, especially thank you for watching a thing about my life that you know nothing about. Hope you know a little bit more about me now, but thanks for watching, and I don't know what July's bonus episode will be, but I'll come up with something, and hopefully you keep watching the regular podcasts and, you know, watching here on Facebook, YouTube, or if you're listening to us on Spotify, thank you for that. I'll see you next time.